All right. Hello everyone. If I haven't already met you already here in the Dopey Zoom rooms, I'm Braden. Um, just gonna share a little experience, strength, and hope with all of you. Um, so I was born December 7th, 1983, in Pittsburgh. Lived here all my life. Had a pretty normal childhood up to a point. Parents were together all throughout, still together. They live in Florida now. Um, I was in a suburb of Pittsburgh, and around the age of 8, um, I experienced multiple incidents of sexual abuse. It wasn't a family member, it was my best friend. His mother had a very close friend who had an older son, a teenage son. His name was Sean, and he was like, so the both of us were 8. I think he was 14 or 15, and he just manipulated us into doing stuff to him and to each other um, a few times, and I didn't know how to process it. Um, like having all this time now to it was something I kept hidden for decades, and like finally going through the process of rehab, and then like the first time I did therapy was in rehab. I've had some time to like reflect on it more. What I do know is it just like over sexualized me at a very young age. um at the time, I don't think I knew that it was wrong. Well, I know I didn't think it was wrong. Like it felt good, and so I continued to follow that kind of instinct and engage in that behavior with the guy that happened with, my friend. And you know uh I think, like, in this weird way, like one of my first memories of ever using substances, I was 9 years old, and I stole some Zimas from my mom. She had them in a basement refrigerator, and I stole them whenever I got a new Lego set. And I remembered, like, I think part of the reason why I grabbed those is I remember her telling her friends about these new wine coolers, Zima. They taste like Sprite, but they're so much fun. And for some reason, I was like, oh, I want that. And so yeah, I grabbed 2 or 3 bottles and then grabbed my Lego set. It was a castle that was on a hinge, and it was on the two flat green grass things that Legos could sometimes, they'd be built on the buildings, and it was supposed to open up. And I drank all of the bottles of Zima while building this, and I just totally fucked up my castle. But I had a great time. I remember laughing about it at the end, and then I think I just went to bed afterward. Um, what's interesting is whenever I was like opening up about these things to my therapist in inpatient rehab, she had mentioned that there's a lot of studies that show that you know we might be at the emotional maturity level of whenever we first started using substances, and that makes a lot of sense because I've had just a lot of friends and um, my wife and just other people tell me that I am just like any other 8-year old. I just act like an 8-year old. And now that makes a lot more sense. Um, anyway, so that experience, and then like how I continued to engage in those behaviors, even though like it was with a peer who had experienced it with me, um, led to a really confusing adolescence. Um, I never told anyone at the time, and probably should have, looking back on it, and probably gotten some therapy. Because even though I moved away from that neighborhood to a different suburb of Pittsburgh whenever my mom changed jobs, I was still able to find young guys that were interested in doing that stuff. You know what I mean? But I would have a lot of shame and guilt. I had this constant internal struggle through my like early adolescent years where I would do homosexual things, but I didn't think I was gay because like my archetype for a gay man was, Jack from Will and Grace, or Ricky from My So-Called Life, if you remember those shows. And I didn't identify with either of those characters. And, I knew that I wanted to have romantic, relationships with girls and date like other kids were in school, but like that wasn't happening for me. But then I still like had these like secret things going on. It was just so much confusion, like this identity crisis of what is my sexuality? I don't know. And then it led into like me also having like a gender identity crisis. For several years, I had wished that I was born female. Um, I thought it would make things just a lot easier, maybe to get some acceptance about, my sexual behavior at this young age. So, I had a lot of struggles with like trying to fit in, changed friend groups quite a bit through all of that. And then, in middle school, seventh grade, buses changed. And then I met this guy, Elliot, and Elliot smoked cigarettes. And, I had been vehemently opposed to like smoking cigarettes. And then just wanted to, I kind of idolized the guy. He was really funny, charismatic, and just kind of fell into like, starting with smoking cigarettes, and then that, graduated into smoking pot. And then that just like set me off. Like that first time I remember getting high, I was like taken out of my body, or it felt like it, and I just wanted that all the time. 14 years old, like it finally numbed down all the confusion and anger and just these internal struggles that I kept just bottling up and not telling people about. And it was the easiest way to deal with just not really knowing where or who I was. And then, it comes with this identity, a stoner, and it hit right away. I wanted it all the time. So I began smoking pot pretty regularly by 15. Definitely by 16 is whenever it became a daily thing. And my friend group kind of evolved from that. Just at 14, there weren't a lot of people that were smoking weed. So there was this little crowd of stoners that I got real close with. And then, as we got a little bit older, we found out that this guy that was a year younger than us, I don't know why, his mom was a lunch lady at our high school, and she was willing to buy us alcohol. And so we'd be giving her cash, like while we're going through and getting the chicken patty sandwich, and then like slipping cash over the, the salad bar type setup there. And Chris would buy us cases of beer, booze and everything. But I liked drinking. I was more of a weekend warrior, but I was definitely a daily pothead. I just absolutely loved it. So all through high school, like my grades declined. I was earlier on, like as I got started, like in middle school, I was a straight A student. I was in gifted programs in elementary school, and then it just like a steep decline by 9th, 10th grade. And all I cared about was getting fucked up with my friends. It led to a lot of battles with my mom and just more rebellious behavior, just not giving a fuck. I found my niche. And so got more into the drug scene. I was trying to think of like a really dopey story from this point. And I remember one of my good buddies was dating this girl from a neighboring school district. And we found out that her dad was this like disgraced pharmacist. He owned his own pharmacy and ran it. He was the pharmacist there. And he talked her into letting us into this room that was locked in their basement that, she was not supposed to go into. And we were looking for painkillers because like I was in I graduated in 2002 from high school. So I was in middle school, high school through the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever like OxyContin was coming out and painkillers were just running rampant through Southwestern PA. You know, we were how bad, you know, I think that Dope Sick show was about like how bad painkillers hit Appalachia and all that up from Florida. So we were looking for painkillers, didn't find any, but we found these tubs, like, you know, like one of those big tubs of like Utz party mix, if you know what that is, with the tortilla chips and pretzels and all that, like one of those size tubs, almost that size. And it was something called butabidol. And I don't know how I thought of it, but I thought like this, the name was similar to barbiturates, and turns out it is. It's a like I guess a low grade barbiturate, and this guy had two or three of them, or maybe more, but we grabbed two, one each, and it took a handful of them, and they fucked you up pretty good. And then so they were a blue pill, and we sold them around the school and called them blue meanies. And I remember guys were passing out in the middle of school. Like there was a pep rally shortly after we started selling these, you know, just out of our lockers. We were so stupid, you know, and there were two guys that like passed out. They didn't have seizures, but they just like freakishly passed out in the middle of this pep rally. Luckily, no one ratted us out because a lot of people knew like where to get the blue meanies in school. I was just really fucking lucky that no one got seriously hurt or overdosed or died or anything like that. So yeah, I really was just into pot and the drug scene, taking hallucinogens and stuff. But everything kind of slowed down near the end of high school. My buddy Gus, who was a guy who was a guy who I was hooking up with quite a bit. So we were very close. But he got mushrooms and to sell. He got a whole shitload of them, and we ended up taking mushrooms 7 days in a row. And by the last night, or maybe it was the sixth night, he did them 7 days in a row. I had the worst psychedelic experience I had ever had. I had done acid and mushrooms before this, and I just freaked the fuck out for like 3 hours. Everyone turned into like two-dimensional characters, like they were made of paper. And it just scared me to death, and I couldn't control the visuals. I kept like trying to do things with like hiding under a blanket or changing lights, you know, it freaked me out. I ended up having like this panic attack and crying, and they finally just like were able to calm me down. But after that, anytime I smoked weed, like I just had this insane amount of paranoia and anxiety, and it just became no longer enjoyable. And that carried over into my freshman year of college. And I actually kind of like slowed down with everything with that. So I got good grades again freshman year and into sophomore year, but I had a hard time fitting in at the college I went to. I went to this state school called Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP. I went there because my mom was a professor there, so I got to go there tuition free. But some of my best friends and this girl who I'd been chasing since 10th grade, they all went to the University of Pittsburgh, Pitt. And so I had access to a car, and I would just go to Pitt, their campus in the city, every weekend. I just wasn't fitting in college. And so I'd go hang out with them quite a bit on the weekends. And I started drinking more. I got more comfortable with that because that's what they were doing down on their campus. And when I'd go back up to IUP, I'm just like pretty straight arrow kid for the most part. But it wasn't until my junior year at IUP, my cousin, who's 7 months younger than me, he got up to IUP, and I had just turned 21. And my cousin Ted, you know, he comes from the more Irish side of the family, and that's like through his dad, who's not my blood relative. And you know, he liked to throw them down, and so we would just start buying cases and just like do case races. And my drinking really started to pick up. And so that became a big part of like junior and senior year. I finally had like a good friend on campus, and through that and through him, like I met some other people, and I had a better time my last 2 years there. Um, the woman who I had kind of chased from like 10th grade on, she she became available, and by the time I was 21, um, we kind of were able to connect, and we started dating. She eventually became my ex-wife. But um, I was happy finally. The woman who I wanted to be with finally let me date her, and things were good. And we were still carrying on like young 20-year-olds, drinking on the weekends. But then, we got jobs and things slowed down, and it's pretty normal. But she was having trouble with anxiety. She was diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder. She was prescribed Xanax, and she like didn't like how it made her feel. So like the anxiety would just get worse and worse, even though she had prescription. It would chill her out, but she didn't like how drowsy it made her, and especially like carrying into the next day. So um, she came from uh, a broken home. Her parents were divorced and remarried, and you know, as the anxiety worsened, I kind of saw a little bit more of like what she learned from her mom about conflict resolution. So like one of her first stories she told me about like when her parents were getting ready to split up is her parents, yeah, they were living separately, and her dad was bringing her and her little sister home. And that was fucking crazy. She got out of the passenger seat, and her dad came out to the back driver's side seat to get her little sister out, and she saw her mom coming from the front door like real quickly, and her mom had a cast iron skillet. And as her dad was like kind of standing up and about to pull her little sister out of the back of the car, just saw her mom wham right up the side of the head with the cast iron skillet. And because she had found out he was having an affair with his little sister's best friend, who was 16 years his junior. And her mom like freaked out, called the cops, had him arrested. And I bring that up because as the anxiety worsened with Rachel, my ex, um, I saw this like really angry side of her. And it was like anytime uh, she'd be frustrated about something that happened at work, or maybe even like on the way home from work, there was bad traffic, she'd come home in just like a pretty bad mood, and it would snowball from like, this happened today and it made me upset, or I can't believe I just sat in the worst traffic coming home. And it would snowball into, we're not making enough money, you know you're overweight, just emotional abuse, like just crazy shit about how we weren't living up to like her expectations of where we should be in life. She had, I guess, some like 15-20 year plan, and we were just not hitting milestones early on into our marriage. um, and that shit would happen frequently. So I started drinking more during the week. It would be after work, and I actually talked to her when I was in treatment, and I was asking her about like how bad was my drinking, because I know it was like a contributing factor in the decision to split up and end our marriage. And she said she would come home from work and I'd just be half in the bag, and it just, I guess I blurred that out, and it makes sense. Like I didn't, she was this like high school crush who I was totally infatuated with. And I, like, from the moment I saw her walk into this study hall before a math class we had together, this is junior year of high school, I was just like, that's the woman I'm going to marry. I totally infatuated. And I guess just had this like fantasy that it would just work out. I would have done anything for her. And I don't know. I just couldn't see that it wasn't working out. And so instead of like talking to her about it or maybe considering getting like counseling or whatever. I just self-medicated. Um, so I began drinking more and more often, just anticipating some sort of like, yeah, like emotional verbal abuse. And at least if I was fucked up, like it wouldn't hurt as bad, you know? So in 2013, uh, we decided to split up. And like that was June of 2013. And then it was just off to the races. Like I um I just started drinking every single day. Like that summer, we both worked in special education. I had time off and I just went wild. It was out every night. And then, you know, hair of the dog the next morning. And then that would just continue and continue. Um, I did miss one part in my story now thinking about it, just going through the timeline. Um, and this, I'll come back to it because it gets relevant later. Anyways, it was a hard thing that happened, but this was back in like 2003. Um, anyway, so yeah, I just developed a daily drinking habit, and I was having fun though. Like I didn't have the immediate consequences of seeing like disappointment on, you know, a spouse's face. So I just like continued to go nuts, and then I started dating uh, who's now my current wife, Annie, um, in 2014. And I was just a daily binge drinker. It was, you know, it wasn't as much in the mornings once I got a new job early in February of 2014. I was keeping it pretty much under control, but it was, you know, every day getting home from work, I would have a bottle of vodka, usually the half gallons, you know, the 1.75, the big handles, and I would just start pouring big drinks, and every day, and then on the weekends it was just all day. Um, you know, so when her and I started seeing each other, you know, I was already addicted. You know, I was an alcoholic, and okay, so now to go back to that thing that happened in 2003. So like, and this will come up later because it just goes into how bad it got. So in 2003, um, my best friend at the time, this guy Nick, who I was really tight with, his little sister was murdered, and it fucked all of us up pretty bad. And we're actually on the 23rd is the 19-year anniversary. I can't believe it's almost 20 years. Um, I remember I went on quite a run with booze after that. Dana, uh, she found out that her like really close friend, this girl Brittany, that her boyfriend was like talking to other women, and so they were all hanging out one night, and she exposed that Brittany's boyfriend Rodney was talking to other women. And I don't know if it's because they were just like all fucked up on whatever. I know there was at least pot and booze there from what like we've read in the articles about it. Um, but they thought the solution to the problem was to tie her up in a laundry room in the basement of the house they were hanging out in and then beat her. Um, hands, their fists and feet, belts, laundry detergent bottles. I mean, they like bound and tortured her for, I guess it was a couple hours. And then I don't know if this was just like some sort of drug induced psychosis, but then whenever they kind of snapped out of it, I guess their solution, I don't know what it was. They marched her uh, to the top of this stairwell off of the Lincoln Highway that runs through PA, Route 30. I think it goes through quite a few states. The stairwell off of the Lincoln Highway, not far from where I live now, which is a little fucked up, but they marched her there. They forced her to strip off all her clothes, and then they shot her in the back of the head, and she just fell down the steps, and they left her body there. Um, and I don't know. It's just it shook like us and our whole community to the core. Um, so needless to say, like unexpected death is kind of tough for me. And 5 months after that happened, another friend of mine, Josh, he committed suicide by heroin overdose. So like when I was in high school, I mentioned earlier that like opiates were getting really popular. I was taking Vicodin and Percocet quite a bit when I was in high school, but I'm sorry, I know I'm jumping back in time, but now it's just making me think of some of these things. Um, uh, yeah, I had a friend who was getting supplied with huge tubes, like the tubes that are like I don't know that big. They hold hundreds of pills. He had a cousin that was a manager or something at a pharmacy, and he was in charge of ordering, so he was able to supply him with just tubes of Vicodin and Percocet. Um, and I was on those for a good few months, not quite a year. Luckily, I was able to kick it when I was 17. For Thanksgiving, we were at my aunt's house. My grandmother was there, my mom's side of the family. And whenever, I don't know how it happened, I was in the bathroom looking for my grandmother's Percocets. I was like going through her bathroom bag, her luggage, and I found Percocets. As I'm like dumping them in my hand, I look up in the mirror and just see what I'm doing and just have this like moment of clarity about what was going on. I just swore them off. Um, I don't know if it's just because like I was still doing so much pot, I didn't like have any withdrawal or sickness from it. I was just lucky to get over it because after that, people uh, graduated to OxyContin, and whenever that got too expensive for people, they all started switching to heroin. And then kids I went to school with just started overdosing, like in the early and mid 2000s. It got to a point where like you weren't surprised to hear that somebody overdosed and died. But the first one was my buddy Josh, and it was just ridiculous. He had transferred to another high school for a little while because he had an argument with the high school football coach. We all played football, and he wasn't getting played for I can't remember what reason, but the argument got so bad that his parents decided to transfer him to a neighboring district to live with family so that he can get playing time. And anyway, so we didn't see him for a little while. I think he just kind of swore off our community and us back at that school. And then he showed up, and he told us that he was going to go and attack his girlfriend or like ex-girlfriend because she was pregnant and that she was going to abort the baby. And like it was so random. He came and visited me when I was at work, and two of our other friends. It was like a Saturday, and we had jobs in high school, and we were all working. And Josh had come around and visited all of us, and he yeah, told the same story, and we're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Well, um, what he ended up doing was just getting a bunch of heroin and decided to kill himself by overdosing instead of like doing this plan. And what's even worse is that we found out that Abby, this girl that he was looking for, wasn't even pregnant. It was a rumor. She was just trying to get attention. So that was 4 months after Dana was killed. So that was bad. And then, anyways, that goes back into unexpected death. So yeah, back to like after the divorce, started dating Annie, daily drinking, like a binge drinker. And I was a functional alcoholic. Like I was able to go to work every day. I started off, um, I was working in a day program for people, adults with disabilities. And, I was able to do my job well, had a great time working with them there. And then I eventually moved into a different department where I had a little bit more autonomy. I was like more like a social worker. I would work out in the community with adults with disabilities. And it was ultimately what I wanted to be doing. I was helping people with disabilities get jobs, get competitive jobs in the community and support them. And it was kind of like a passion project because when I was in grad school, I studied special education, and my focus was on transition planning, which is like what special ed students do after they finish school. So I just wanted to help them, achieve the best outcomes they could. But again, like I didn't have any boss looking over my shoulder, and I really threw myself into the work. And so I'd be working these crazy long hours. And the stress that I would put myself through to just try and do the best job, just like people pleasing kind of, and like perfectionism with my work, I would just get so stressed out that like my drinking would ramp up. And it would be, even though if I was like working from home and trying to help these people by like contacting employers or coming up with different plans, like the only thing that would help me deal with the anxiety and stress I had for my job was just drinking more and more. But I mean, things were going well. I was doing good. I got promoted within that department. And then the position I had was um, involved in this initiative that we did. Like, I don't know if any of you are familiar with what a lot of services for people with disabilities look like, but there will be lots of things. They're called sheltered workshops. And it's like these just facilities for people with disabilities where they can do menial type of job tasks like assembly, like think of like an assembly line or something. And, uh, it's like this segregated working population, and they get paid usually piece rate. And on paper, it looks good, but it is just like warehousing people with disabilities away from like, the rest of us, and they're working, but it's really a disservice. And so my company had decided that they weren't going to continue to offer those kinds of services. So it was this initiative that we did called the Pathway to Employment. And then I wasn't the project lead, but I was like one of the main characters, like I shouldn't say character, but like main players in that project. So, I was really excited about what we were doing. We were breaking down barriers, like removing, getting this workforce ready to go and be out in the community, get fully integrated. And through that, I got connected with this one business owner who had a company that did like garments, like a Cintas or like Unifirst. You maybe have seen stuff like that where they like help, auto mechanics at like a dealership where they, people have uniforms for employees. They're the people that come and clean all the dirty ones, and then they'll like bring them back. And it's just like a whole scale service. Well, here's the story. So this guy was this third generation of ownership. His dad and uncle, who had owned it before, his uncle had the oldest son in their a group of cousins. I know this is so complicated. Anyways, Phil was the guy's name, and his oldest cousin was Cecil. And Cecil was in the company who I worked for. He was in one of those warehouses, those sheltered workshops. Phil, his cousin, who had taken over the business from their dads, felt guilty that their dads had sworn off Cecil and his younger brother David from being able to work in the family business. They thought that they would be a distraction or like a nuisance to work there. And so Phil felt like compelled to like give back. He had two cousins, Cecil and David, who had, just intellectual disabilities. And, he wasn't the oldest cousin, Cecil was. And, by, I guess, birthright, Cecil should have had the business. And it was just like this, he felt some sympathy and compassion for people like Cecil and David. So he wanted to give some opportunities at their business. And we gave them, we didn't refer them Cecil and David at first, just some other job seekers. But Cecil was one of my clients, and we tried a few different things and nothing worked out. So I had this relationship with Cecil's cousin Phil that spanned about like 18 months. And near the end of that, we had spent a good portion of that trying to find this like customized role for Cecil in the family business. Cause like Cecil was just so excited for the opportunity to work for the family business. I spent quite a bit of time, like trying to figure this out, going to all their different business sites and like just find some sort of role for him. It is a passion project. So this is in 2018. And so October 27th, 2018 is when the Tree of Life synagogue shooting happened in Pittsburgh. And if you're not familiar, this white nationalist, anti-Semite piece of shit named Robert Bowers thought it would be a good idea to go and try and eliminate some members of the Jewish threat to his whiteness. I don't know. And he went to the Tree of Life synagogue and shot and killed 11 parishioners. On that day, we were going to have a Halloween party. And that morning I heard about the shooting, and I texted Phil, one of Phil's sons, who I had been working on, like getting this job for Cecil. I texted one of Phil's sons. I was like, holy shit, what's going on? And he said, I don't have any information, you know, we're just hoping that everything's okay. We haven't heard anything. And then like 2 hours later, I get this text from Jake. That was his name. Unfortunately, Cecil and David are among the dead. That was Saturday, October 27th, 2018. And Cecil was supposed to start his job on Wednesday, what would have been, what, the 31st. And like, I don't know. I know it was like kind of out of sequence, but I mentioned like what happened to David or Dana back in 2003, my friend's sister that was killed. And then, you know, went through the stages of grief with that, and I guess gained some acceptance, but this just brought it all back, and it was just compounded by losing 2 more people at once. And like, I was beyond devastated. I was like useless. I didn't know what to do. I took like the next week and a half off of work, and all I did was drink like all day. I don't think I really ate. Like as time went on, I met like more people in the company, and I don't know why I even like, I don't think I was seeking the information, but I had a conversation with like some of the people that worked. Our company also had like the group home that Cecil and David lived in. And the guys that worked there told me the story. And, you know, oh, fuck. So Cecil was the very first victim because he always sat at the back of Temple and he would greet people. And, you know, I was the very first victim, you know, shot in the head and center mass. And then I found out that David was being escorted out by like people that he was sitting with, but he wrestled away from them and ran back up the aisle to try and help his brother, and he was killed in the same manner. Oh man, I was just gone. Like I lost like a lot of desire to like do my job effectively anymore. Like it was demoralizing. So that's whenever I just began living in a bottle. Like it was sun up to sun up for me. You know, there'd be like mornings. I remember brushing my teeth and then like vomiting and then just being like, oh, tank's empty, let's fill her up again, you know. And I'd have two travel mugs when I'd go to work if I had like meetings or whatever, and you know, one with coffee, one with booze. I'm drinking still while like maybe I'm picking up clients and then taking them out to meet employers for job interviews or to turn in applications, or I couldn't stop. And it's just I don't even know what would have fucking happened if I would have gotten arrested for a DUI with someone with like autism or Down syndrome, just disabilities in my car. Like I was just so fucking lucky I never got busted. I don't know. I just kept going. There was like no major consequences. I'm pretty sure people knew, but no one said anything. So I just continued on and it God. So like during the pandemic, I just then it was you know, we were working remotely. We weren't allowed to go out and provide services anymore in the community. Everything was shut down. So everyone just like stayed home, and that just gave me permission to just like it became almost more acceptable, if that makes sense. Just to just drink all day. Um, just disgusting amount. God. Well, through that, like by June, my wife was just disgusted, and she didn't know what else to do. Like we had had talks about maybe slowing down, and then I started playing the games with like hidden bottles around and like trying to make it look like I wasn't drinking from the one that was on the bar cart, because we would always keep, you know what I mean, and just play the liquid levels game kind of, where I'd have bottles hidden in the basement that I would just go like sip from. And you know, she just started seeing through all my little tricks. Oh, I won't do it during the day, you know. And she could just tell just by looking at me, just like glassed over eyes and everything, and must have had like I don't know. It was a tell immediately. She didn't even have to smell my breath or anything. So um, I tried for her to do IOP, and I did like an ambulatory detox in the summer of 2020. And at the IOP, they were really pushing Vivitrol for alcoholics. And I don't know. I wanted to try something. Like I was in trouble of losing my second marriage. We had bought in our house. We had bought our house in February of 2020, and I didn't want to lose this home and my relationship. Um, so I figured, oh fuck, I'll give it a try. Now, the IOP was a joke. I mean, there was people nodding off in class. I don't think they were shooting up, but everyone was like, there were people selling subs, I think, in the parking lot. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't learn more about that until I went into like actual inpatient. But the Vivitrol was so weird for me. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but it just like made me totally like flat and numb, like emotionless. And I didn't like how it made me feel. Uh, I was getting the injections. I don't know if I mentioned that. And so I knew something that would make me feel again, or at least I'd hoped it would. And I started drinking again. And uh, it was just back and forth, like relapse after relapse after relapse, for about the next year. Um, and like as the pandemic continued on, in like January of 2021 is whenever I started having just these like really bad depressive moods, where I wouldn't get out of bed for days at a time other than to just walk my dog or go to the bathroom or pour another drink. And so I'd like bounce back for maybe a week after something like that, but I just still stayed in this like depressive haze. And I went and saw my PCP in June of 2021 and talked to him about depression. There is a family history. My mom's dad I only found this out like later on in treatment, whenever my mom opened up a little bit more about the family history, but I did know that he was severely depressed. So I mentioned that, and just talked about what was going on with me. And then he prescribed me Lexapro. Um, so I started taking that in June of 2021. And in July, around the 4 to 5 week period, I became manic. I had never experienced anything like it before. I was feeling amazing. I felt great finally. Like I was happy. I was giddy. I was like excited to go back to work and do it well. And I actually slowed down the drinking. It was still daily, but like I was able to stop and not do it during the day. But then like I didn't sleep, and then I just wanted to go out all night. And then like I was womanizing whenever I would go out. Like I was out of control. Like no one could stop me. And I started to freak out my wife and my parents because like she was telling them what was going on, and I was just ignoring them. They would text and call and just fuck it. I'm just having a great time being me, and I'm happy again. Like why can't anyone just see that I'm happy and this is great? And then I it got to August and I'm still in full on like mania from the Lexapro. Um, and then it was just like the worst night of my life. So I went to the bar, and this guy that was tending bar was someone who I used to party with in high school, and he was making me nice strong drinks, and we were catching up. And then he showed me he had a Crown Royal sack behind the bar, and it had all of his like medical marijuana. He got That's all we have in PA, and I remember him like pulling out like a box of 1,000 milligram tinctures. And what I do know a little bit, like I stopped smoking weed, like I had mentioned, like slowed down quite a bit in like my 20s, but I knew 1,000 milligrams was like, holy shit, that's got to be strong. And he gives me a brownie at the end, and I should have maybe paid a bit more attention to the fact that he had 1,000 milligram tinctures. I don't know that these were in there, but he was like, just have about a quarter of that, and then wait and see how you feel. And I did. I listened to him. I ate a quarter of the brownie, and like 45 minutes later, I was like, oh, this is bullshit, and ate the whole thing. And then went outside to smoke a cigarette. And then, like, as soon as I came back in, I just started to feel it, like, I think building up from like my feet. And then it just came over me in like this crazy crashing wave, like the wave that Swayze's looking out for in the end of Point Break. And I thought I was having a stroke. I was doing dishes at like 12:30 or 1 in the morning or something like that. Um, and it felt like the bottom right lip was sagging. This whole side of my face was numb. My fingers and toes were numb. And I was just convinced I was having a stroke. My dad had had one, and there was the history of it in like his side of the family. So that's all I could think. So I like dropped to the floor, military crawled from the kitchen to the living room, and just start screaming and wake up my wife and just like screaming for her to call 911. And this is where that evening like kind of goes in like these moments where like I probably closed my eyes to deal with how powerful like the weed psychosis was. But like, so next thing I know, when my eyes are open again, there's paramedics in the living room. They're talking with Annie, and she's just like, oh, he just ate a pot brownie. And I hear the EMT being like, oh, it's just a pot brownie. Oh, he'll probably be able to sleep it off. And then I just start screaming at them like, you motherfuckers, I'm stroking out. You're going to take me to the fucking hospital. And then like the next moment of coming back and like knowing what's happening is I'm in the ambulance. And I don't know, at this point when I'm in the ambulance, like I don't know if it's panic or what. I just have this like violent urge. And the best way I can describe what happened next was like this internal battle of like Hulk and Bruce Banner. I wanted to hurt the EMT, but like that was the Hulk. And then Bruce Banner saying, like, no, you can't do that. So I tell her, I'm pretty sure it was a woman. I was like, I don't want to hurt you, but you need to restrain me. And she's like, sorry, sir, I can't do that. And I just repeat my name, my full name. I'm Braden Scheib. This is my date of birth. I'm giving you permission to restrain me. I don't want to hurt you. And then she finally like gives in, and then she has me put my arms across my chest like this. And I remember, like, I think I had closed my eyes again, but I do remember the feeling of like this metal bar going underneath my wrists and two clamps going over the wrists. And then maybe a couple seconds later, I just went and broke it and just said, "That's not good enough." And then she just said, "We're almost at the hospital. You need to just hold on to the sides of the stretcher." So just like Hulk and Bruce Banner are going back and forth, and who knows who's going to win. Um, I remember being on the stretcher and they're wheeling me through UPMC East Hospital in the emergency room. And I am screaming at the top of my lungs, still demanding to be restrained because some reason I still have this violent impulse, but I want to be under control. Like I don't want to do it. Um, and they're not listening to me. And I'm still doing like the same spiel of like, I'm giving you consent, or I'm giving my consent for you to restrain me. And then I know how I can get restrained. If I like hit one of them, I open my eyes and it's just female nurses. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do this shit. And then close my eyes again, open them back up. And then now it's finally male nurses. I guess I raised enough of like a fucking shitstorm that they were like, okay, get, Larry and Barry here to be with him. And once Barry to my right turned his head and looked away from me, I just kind of got up on my lower back a little bit and then just pushed him toward the wall. And all of a sudden they hold me down finally. And I remember telling them, thank you. Like, oh, thanking them for restraining me. But then the Hulk wanted like one last go. And I just went, oh, and like screamed and tried to bring them all up and like bring my arms up and my legs up. And then next thing I know is I felt a sensation. I'm pretty sure they just jabbed me with Haldol and injected me. I was out. And then next thing I know is just waking up. I don't know if I was in the same room or not. I turn to the left and Annie is there. And she is just like exasperation, despair, doesn't know what to do. She wasn't present for any of this, but I'm pretty sure they told her like exactly what had happened, probably in the ambulance, what I was like coming into the hospital. And she was at her wit's end. And I had just like, I was powerless over my addictions, and my life is truly now unmanageable. And I hear some figures, like I couldn't see that well, but there was like these blobs of gray at the foot of my bed, or maybe just beyond it. And they're just like, we think you should check into this neighboring hospital, UPMC McKeesport, for detox and rehab. And so August 21st, 2021 is when I checked into UPMC McKeesport for their detox. That's my clean date. I was there for a week, and I went to an inpatient rehab called Silver Pines Treatment Center out east, out in eastern PA, and I did 30 days there. And after that, I transferred to a PHP program called Steps to Recovery, a little bit closer to Philadelphia. And the PHP program is whenever, I started to listen a little bit, but like we were still under some COVID restrictions, so we couldn't go out into the community and do meetings until I got to the PHP program. But I was starting to come around, talked a lot. This is the first time I had ever been in therapy at the inpatient and was able to talk about a lot of these things. And that was like also where I talked about what had happened as a kid, the sexual abuse, sexual confusion. And, my first therapist there, like, we talked about, my sexual identity is bisexual. I kept that to myself until I got to the PHP program at the end of September. And when I was there, I came out on October 2nd and shared that with my family and friends. In there, I just, I don't know the exact moment, but if I were to describe it, you just like thinking about like, okay, from 14 to 38, my solution to dealing with all the shit going on, whether it's the trauma from childhood, confusion about my identity, going through what became an abusive marriage, and just the trauma of unexpected deaths, like was self-medicating for 24 years. Why not try 24 years of sobriety? um, what could it hurt, right? Um, I got properly medicated for bipolar disorder. My diagnosis changed because apparently, if you have a bipolar brain and you take an SSRI like Lexapro, uh, people who go manic off something like that are most likely bipolar. Um, so I'm on Lamictal now. That's helping. Um, I'm in 12-step fellowships. I have an NA home group and sponsors in that same group with me. I'm a GSR for that one. I go to an AA meeting as well. I was going to meetings like 6 days a week. I tried 7 whenever I first got out of treatment, and was going to do the 90 and 90, but it was just, I don't know. It didn't work for me, but I pared it down to 2 really good in-person meetings that I love. And then in January, whenever there was shitty weather, like right around Christmas time, I had discovered Dopey, and then I think joined the Facebook group, and then found out about the Zooms. And then there was like really bad weather here in Pittsburgh, and then I saw that Ish was doing a meeting at 6 o'clock on a Sunday, and came in here and met all you dopes, and it gave me access to people from all over the world, a more convenient meeting space for me, just because I don't know, my job can still be like pretty crazy. I'm in a new job now, and this is just, yeah, again, more convenient, and things are looking good. I didn't have to change too many people, places, and things other than like an employer, but I'm back in the same house. I'm in the same relationship. I still have my friends. I, got back into my hobbies. Whenever I was drinking, I kind of like got away from it. It was all I cared about. I fell in love with alcohol. It was like I romanticized it to the point that I cared about it more than other people and the things that I used to like to do, drinking or not. And I discovered in treatment that I can enjoy those activities sober. And so, I got the hope and the commitment to try some long-term sobriety, because certainly almost a quarter century of using substances and chemicals, just, it didn't help. It didn't get me what I wanted. There was those initial rushes of like the first time getting high and feeling like I'm fitting in, and how alcohol would help me forget about stressors and whatever shit was going on, but none of it ever really went away, and I wasn't effectively dealing with it until I started this process back in August. And so, about to celebrate 7 months sober on Monday, and that's it. Thank you for listening, and guess open it up to any questions or anything, any feedback.